Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, it is my pleasure to welcome you here to this session of our workshop. And this is a session which is dedicated to the European and North American experiences. We have an excellent panel here to give us the European and North American perspective and lessons learned. And without further ado, I will introduce the members of the panel, starting with Mr. Paolo Garzotti, whom most of you know very well. Mr. Garzotti is Deputy Permanent Representative of the European Commission here in Geneva. He has a background in law, and before coming to Geneva, he was in charge of both the division dealing with multilateral affairs, as well as the division responsible for coordinating trade policy with the Council and the European Parliament. Mr. Garzotti also has worked for the European Commission's Director General for Customs and Taxation and the Directorate General of Trade. Mr. Garzotti will talk about the European initiatives to support MSMEs, in particular the EU Trade Helpdesk and the European Cluster Collaboration Platform. I'm also happy that we managed to rectify a bit the gender balance on this panel, thanks to Mrs. Maria Mogilnaya. She's Associate Banker in charge of Trade Facilitation Program at the European Bank of Reconstruction and Development in London. If I'm not mistaken, you have not moved so far yet, not yet, okay. Dr. Mogilnaya is experienced in negotiating and structuring trade finance transactions in developing countries and in private sector development through innovative technical assistance projects. Since 2011, Dr. Mogilnaya has been working at the EBRD within its trade facilitation program. Dr. Mogilnaya will present Trade Ready, which is the EBRD's trade finance and advisory initiative for small and medium-sized enterprises. And then I have on my left Monsieur Stéphane Lambert, who is Counsellor at the Canadian Mission to the European Union. Mr. Lambert has been a member of the Canadian Public Service for 14 years. Currently, he is Counsellor at the Mission of Canada to the European Union, as I already indicated. In his previous role as Director General of Trade Strategy and Portfolio Coordination at Global Affairs Canada, Mr. Lambert was accountable for developing approaches to meet Canada's goal for trade, including through the conception, implementation, and tracking of trade promotion strategies which were also covering MSMEs. Monsieur Lambert will present Canada's recent tools to support MSMEs. And then last but not least, Mr. Alberto Silini, who is head of consultancy at Switzerland Global Enterprise. Since 2011, Mr. Silini has been managing the export consulting team of Switzerland Global Enterprise, which is the official export promotion agency for Switzerland and Liechtenstein. His team assists 2,000 Swiss companies annually in their export projects to foreign markets. From 2008 to 2011, he was project manager with the framework of the stabilization measures for the Swiss government. He developed export promotion measures to support the Swiss export industry. This resulted in export platforms for clean tech, medtech, and infrastructure. Mr. Silini will present Switzerland's experience with MSMEs. So I propose that we start in the order in which I have introduced the speakers. It means that, Paolo, you will be the first speaker. And perhaps, you may broach two issues. First of all, we would like to have your views about the key lessons learned on how best to support MSMEs from the EU's perspective. And also perhaps, based on this experience, how the WTO could best contribute to assisting MSMEs in participating in global markets. Paolo, you have the floor.
Thank you, Didier, and thank you to you all for having invited the EU to present its own experiences in terms of how to support SMEs, and more particularly I will follow the mandate that's been given me by the organizers to focus on two instruments that we have in place in order to help SMEs joining the international market and getting hooked onto the global value chains. The two instruments I'll be talking about are the Trade Help Desk and the European Cluster Collaboration Platform. First of all, a few words on how micro, small and medium economies in the EU, we use the acronym small and medium economies, participate to the EU economy. As you see in the slide, they are the backbone of it. In terms, of course, of numbers, they represent 99% of all business and 2/3 of the total private employment. But when you look at the challenges of these enterprises, and a recent poll that we have commissioned through the European Clusters platform shows this even more forcefully, we find that accessing international market, internationalize the business is the most difficult challenge. 25% only of EU-based SME do exports at all. This is probably something that is not new for many of your micro, small, medium enterprises as well. What we have been trying to do in the EU, of course in the EU we have policies and initiatives that target particularly small and medium enterprises, but we think that as far as, in particular global rules, but generally initiatives trying to do something that helps all enterprises broadly, but have a particular additional value for SMEs is the way to go about it. And this is what we have done, for example, on the EU Trade Help Desk. The EU Trade Help Desk was born several years ago, already almost 15 years ago, when we wanted to make sure that those countries and exporters that wanted to access the European market had all the information that were necessary in order to do so as well, because we have started discovering relatively early in the game that having good sources of import from outside the European Union was a fundamental component to have competitive exports from the European Union. So we created the help desk. The fundamental shape remained the same over the years. If you see here, is interface where you write where you want to export from to where EU member states, because you might have some differences depending on the member states concerned, and the product code. And then you click and you have a series of information. So it's a website that allows companies to know how to export to the EU. Is a source of information on several data that I will go more in detail afterwards. Is a database on trading goods, because as well you have all imports data and the trade statistics included in this database. It's free of charge, that these days is not something to be undervalued. And as always in the European Union, we try to be as attentive as we can to languages. Is in English, French, Spanish, and Portuguese. Actually, we have, as you see, have a new version of the help desk launched. Need to go back. Just a few weeks ago. So what can you find on the help desk if you encode, as I said, an export country, an import country, and a product? First of all, the requirements. Health, safety, technical standards, marketing standards. You can find the customs duty, the erga omnes MFN customs duties, but as well the possible exemptions from duties that that a member has right to, some export has right to, and if there's a quota administrator, the database for the quota, so a link to have the level of consumption of the quota. You have rules of origin according to the several trade agreements and preferential schemes. So if I, for example, include as an expert members an LDC, I would find out the rules of origin, the new rules of origin that we had for LDCs, and the fact that they can export everything without quota and without duties. You have as well the data on the competent authority, customs offices, chamber of commerce in the various EU countries where you export, and the trade statistics that might help you in as well taking some decision before you export. Now, all of this we think that is something that will be of use for the broader WTO membership. As a matter of fact, as you probably all of you know, we are trying to promote within here in Geneva with WTO, with the support of WTO, ITC, UNCTAD, and international organizations that are active in this field, to see if we can have an agreement to have something similar to the EU trade help desk, but at a global level, so that everyone could have access to this kind of information from encoding whatever exporting member to whatever importing member. We would think that this is the kind of instrument that, while being not necessarily only for MSMEs, would benefit in particular MSMEs to enhance their participation on global markets. Another initiative that we have been working on in the European Union is more recent, and if you want, less trade-focused, but with important implications in the ability of SMEs and MSMEs to accede to global markets, is the so-called European Cluster Collaboration Platform. Now, first maybe since I banged into the difficulty of the jargons myself when preparing this presentation, I might say you a few words on what we in the European Union call cluster organization. They're basically business intermediaries that they bring together in a region a number of members in an innovation network, and these clusters include research organization, university, large firms, and small and medium enterprise. Originally, all of you might have some region in your territories where there's a specific group of enterprises good at one particular field, but here we are talking something even more complete with, as I say, university and research. You can have one particular sector. To give you an example that probably is well known as well here in Geneva, in France, nearby Toulouse, there's of course an important cluster organization representing the aerospace sector, which the aerospace valley, and these clusters can put together up to 400 or 500 small and medium enterprises, and as I say, with university and big enterprise, and that helps them. Is basically customers are a springboard to allow them to get in access to global value chains. This is basically what we try to do through these clusters, but I'm here interested in particular to the access to market information and the internalization of clusters, so the red circle down there. What are these clusters doing? They organize network events, trainings, study tours. They try to make sure that small and medium enterprises do not have the resources to get in touch with the big companies, with the university, and try to see where the added value could be more welcome. These clusters are basically supporting, you have imagined an office with 10, 20 people, depending on the size of the clusters, provides input to small and medium enterprises and allows them to, for example, make sure that they find the right clusters to participate in. The kind of, for example, said that one particular technology, my company is specialized in that to try to find access to that. They work in international cooperation. There are clusters that are particularly related to work in other big economies. We have a lot of work going on with the United States. For example, all of this is done, all this networking is done through a clusters platform, which is basically a user-friendly, user-driven platform where you can have this kind of initiatives. You have, I show here as well, so the hub in the cluster platform has now 65 cluster organization profiled. As I told you, the size of the cluster organization differs, but we have considered that we have more or less 65,000 small and medium enterprise organized like that. They organize these clusters, and through the platform this takes place as well, matchmaking events in several countries, and that helps small and medium enterprise to find possibility to cooperate together and with third countries as well. And as I say, we have a particular emphasis on trying to create partnership at global level. For the time being, most interested we've seen is relatively new with the United States, but we are working on the rest. So this is another instrument, the cluster collaboration platform, by which this group of big, small, and enterprises together with research and development institutions and university can create opportunity, and they provide to small and medium enterprise the support that their structure do not have. I would say that they do for them the kind of work that if they have to pay it, big consultancy company would have to do, and instead this is done and is provided through an initiative of this kind, which, as I said, is supported. The clusters are supported at regional and state level, and the platform is instead managed by the European Commission. I think I was bound to stay within the 6-8 minutes, so I probably have done already more than that. So thanks a lot, Chairman.
Thank you very much, Paolo, for your presentation. And now I would like to invite Mrs. Mogilnaya to make her presentation on the EBRD's Trade, Finance and Advisory Initiative for SMEs. You have the floor, please.
Thank you very much, Ambassador. And I was sitting here the whole day and looking at all the different presentations, and I think that I will be an odd one out, because I actually come from trade finance side, and we are trying to see how we can cooperate with advisory for SMEs. So I hope I can tell you something that would be of interest, and maybe to start with, which I think is important, since everyone needs to identify what we understand by MSMEs. So in my presentations, SMEs, but we also look at micro enterprises. We follow the EU definition. So for the EBRD, for the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, small businesses or MSMEs will be following the EU definition, which is any enterprise with a turnover over 50 million euros. Sorry, over it will be not an MSME, so under 50 million, and with the employees between 10 and 250 employees. And it could exceptionally go up to 500 employees, and this would constitute an MSME plus. Okay, so now let me tell you about the EBRD. The EBRD is the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development. It was set up in 1991 to help the post-Soviet countries to transition to market economies. Private sector development is very important, and especially the small enterprises or MSMEs, they are at the heart of the mandate of the EBRD. And as you can see here, we cover a specific region. We do not work globally. And as our communications put it very nicely, we cover countries between Morocco and Mongolia and between Estonia and Egypt. So that's somewhere in between there. That's our region of operations. We are owned by more than 60 governments and 2 international organizations, which are the European Union and the European Investment Bank. So the 2 programs that we have, which up to now have somehow had relation to MSMEs, was the Trade Facilitation Program. That's the one where I work. And it was set up in 1999 to support trade. And it has been decided at the time that we are not able to work with importers and exporters directly. So it was chosen that we will use intermediaries, we will use partner banks to help us reach out to importers and exporters. We have trade finance lines for our partner banks up to 1.5 billion. And this morning I received news update from our office in London that as of today our portfolio is just over 1 billion euros. So at the moment we support 1 billion euros in trade between our countries of operations and imports into our countries and exports out of our countries. We have 3 facilities that we offer to our partner banks. These are guarantee facilities, something that was earlier mentioned by the Afro-Exim Bank. It's when the countries don't want to take the risk of each other, they don't know, the importer and exporter don't know each other, or the banks don't know each other. So they can come to us and ask for a guarantee. We also provide revolving credit facilities. These are facilities to fund import-export operations. We provide funding to our partner banks, which is then on lent to the importers and exporters. And we also provide factoring facilities. Apart from the actual trade finance and the finance part, we also provide technical assistance to our partner banks. So now let's move on to what we do for small businesses or MSMEs. I actually quite like the name. We provide business advice, and this comes in 2 parts. It can be local advisory or international advisory. For local advisory, we maintain a database of local consultants who are trained by the EBRD. They have to be accredited and they go through a rigorous process of training and to be able to be selected for such projects. For international advisory, we work with former CEOs, CFOs, chief operating officers from companies who have a long-standing experience in a specific industry or with a specific business process. Small businesses can access this advisory by contacting our local offices in 26 countries of operations. And the EBRD, through generous donor support, also covers a part of the cost. We also provide specific trainings. This can be market development activities. For example, recently we had a training in Serbia on winemaking. So the wineries in Serbia wanted to learn about different requirements for exports to other countries, what kind of certification they may require. So we may bring an international advisor who can deliver a workshop to explain these things. And apart from them as well, we do sector-based business matching trips and networking opportunities to connect businesses from different countries. So these are the 2 programs that the EBRD has had for a long time. Under the Trade Facilitation Program, we have conducted more than 20,000 individual import or export transactions. And equally, under the Advice for Small Businesses, we supported more than 20,000 MSMEs. And what we have come to realize is that our partner banks are not able to sell trade finance to MSMEs. They came to us and they asked for help. They said that we have helped them to build up trade finance operations. They are now specialists in issuing letters of credit, and they can recite the Incoterms by heart. But unfortunately, when it comes to selling trade finance, they are not successful. As I mentioned earlier, our program is structured to work with partner banks, so it's quite difficult for us to reach to importers and exporters. So we had to be creative by looking at training the front office staff of partner banks, how to sell trade finance, helping partner banks maybe to develop some incentive systems where they, for the sale of trade finance instrument or a product, they get more points than for selling just a normal overdraft or a credit line. Under the advice for small businesses, the problem was on the supply side. So the companies could have received an advisory, they may know how to market themselves, they may know how to launch a new product, but they were not able to secure financing from the local banks. So we took 2 countries just to study and see what is where's the gap. So here's an example of the trade finance and advice in Georgia. You can see that we have done almost 2,000 transactions in trade finance, and our colleagues in the advisory have done almost 1,000 projects. However, the overlap, meaning that the number of MSMEs that received both trade finance and advance was only 59. Another example is Serbia. We chose it, both countries were chosen because they're quite active in the trade facilitation program and also in advisory. In Serbia, you can see that the overlap was even less. It was only 15 companies, or MSMEs, that received both trade finance and advice. This was a very eye-opening moment for us. So we needed to create a synergy. We needed to find a way how we can provide both advice and trade finance to MSMEs so that they can grow and they can export, they can trade. So that's where our Trade Ready initiative came together. And here the name may be interpreted in different ways. So we help MSMEs be ready to trade. We also make the environments in the countries ready to allow trade. And we also help banks to provide trade finance and explain it to MSMEs. So the main objective of Trade Ready is to strengthen the import and export capabilities of MSMEs. And apart from providing trade finance and know-how, we will also be looking at evaluating the business environment and legal and regulatory environment and see whether we can somehow influence the changes which can benefit MSMEs. So here's the graphical concept for you here, where you can see the EBRD has expertise in trade finance, advice, and legal transition. So that's another part of our offering, where our colleagues in the legal transition program work with governments to make changes to the legal and regulatory environment. To give you an example, some companies may need factoring, and the banks are happy to offer factoring. However, there is no law on factoring. So the banks are not very eager to launch a new product if there is no legal mechanism for true sale of receivables, or if they don't know whether the claim in court will actually stand. So for these purposes, we have our colleagues in the legal transition team to help us. And it may be an ambitious plan, but we hope to work with the governments in the countries, with the trade support institutions, with partner banks and MSMEs, and help to deliver the trade finance and advice, also through policy dialogue. I just wanted to draw your attention. We have created some case studies, and earlier there was a question about success stories. So I have these 2 case studies. They are also available at that door on the left. So when you leave the room, you can take a copy. And here, without yet proactively marketing Trade Ready, we have already identified that some companies benefited from both advice and trade finance. For example, a clay roof tile producer they wanted to increase turnover and profits, and they were advised by an energy audit engineer that they may replace or invest into a new clay oven. They did invest it, but of course they needed to import it. So they approached one of our partner banks to finance this. So these are just 2 examples. We have more. We will be very happy to share our experience. And I think the one lesson learned, to close it, to wrap it up, I think that in isolation, trade finance or advice or any other support that can be given, it will not work. It has to be a holistic approach, and that's something that we try to implement.
Thank you very much, Mrs. Mogilnaya, for those considerations regarding trade finance. It's right, you said you were a kind of outlier here in this WTO context, which is more or less dedicated to trade and the regulatory environment regarding trade issues. But of course, trade finance is quite relevant to MSMEs. And now I would like to give the floor to Mr. Stéphane Lambert, who will make a presentation of Canada's recent tools to help MSMEs. And you need the remote comment. Okay.
Thank you very much, Ambassador Chambovey. Hello, good afternoon, everybody. Canada is very glad to be associated with this initiative and eager to share its experience with MSMEs and how to help them succeed in international commerce. So I will briefly outline for you, give you a snapshot of the landscape for MSMEs in Canada, and then provide you with an overview of very recent concrete experiences with tools that are currently being rolled out to help MSMEs succeed in trade. Listening to all the presentation this morning, it strikes me how the landscape that we have for MSMEs in Canada is should be very familiar to you, which points me to maybe some of the common challenges we face as a group. So Canada is very much a country dominated by MSMEs. Our MSMEs are very small by all account. The majority of them have less than 20 employees. But they account for the vast majority of employment, roughly 90%. Only a fraction of them export. This is the chart on your left here. This is a concern because we know that our exporters are more sustainable over time. They have a higher impact on jobs, growth, yada, yada, yada. It is also a concern because we know that we have many shadow exporters. These are almost ready to export firms or ready to export firms that just stay on the fence. They don't take the jump for various reasons. So leaving growth potential on the table. The other concern is if you look at the other two charts, the vast majority of our exporters are MSMEs, but what they export is actually small in comparison to large companies, pointing to a lack of scale and difficulty in international trade. In fact, we know that of current MSMEs exporters today, only 1 out of 2 will remain in the exporting business in 2 years, and 1 out of 5 in 5 years. So helping them navigate the complexities of global commerce is a key objective of Canada's progressive trade agenda. Let me just say a word on the main vehicle by which Canada provides trade support to our MSMEs. This is the Canadian Trade Commissioner Service. This is one of the oldest Government of Canada institution. It provides help to MSMEs in 2 fundamental ways. First, it helps MSMEs build knowledge of international markets. It provides free of charge intelligence on commercial opportunities around the world, tips to navigate foreign markets, assistance on the ground, and in occasion troubleshooting. And secondly, it provides visibility to MSMEs by facilitating introduction to key local contacts and buyers and potential partners on the ground. Its main clients are MSMEs, especially the small and the young one, and we have proven results. We know that MSMEs that work with the Trade Commissioner Service export more, export to more markets, and are more diversified in terms of the number of products exported than MSMEs that do not work with the Trade Commissioner Service. Just a word on partnership. There's a whole, and I'm sure it's the same in your country, a whole array of domestic organizations that provide some sort of economic development support to our MSMEs. Our experience is that this ecosystem works best when it is coherent and coordinated in helping MSMEs progress to the various stages of growth. So a lot of efforts have been given in the last few years to foster this kind of and nurture this coherent environment. And it's been formalized among the 4 key export-oriented agencies in Canada: the Export Development Corporation, which is our export credit agencies that provides all kinds of insurance solutions to exporters; the Business Development Bank of Canada that provides access to financing, venture capital, mentorship; and the Canadian Commercial Corporation that negotiates on behalf of SMEs with foreign governments. So together with the Trade Commissioner Service, we offer a sort of a continuum of service to firms to accompany them through their export journey. Let me turn now to 4 practical tools that have been recently deployed. The youngest one is the Canada Tariff Finder. This provides basic information to exporters on Canada's free trade agreements. It's an online tool, very business friendly. And it makes tariff info readily available to exporters. They're able to search according to their own goods products, and then they're able to find the tariff rates that apply to them. And there is also information on tariff phase-out, TRQs, so they're able to plan accordingly. They're also able to compare the FTA tariff with the MFN tariff to assess their competitive position, and to compare also their tariff for their own product among a number of markets. Currently, there is information, there's tariff data covering about 35 countries with which Canada has an FTA. More information will be added over time. But I can say that this covers about 80% of Canada's merchandise trade with the world. In the first 6 months of launch, our response has exceeded expectation. We had over 60,000 visits to the website and over 6,000 searches performed. As you can see, the interface is very user-friendly. You can also you can print your results or have them emailed to you. The second tool is the CAN Export Program. This was launched about less than 2 years ago. This is a small financial assistance program to support costs associated with market exploration. So firms can apply, and then they have to commit to explore a market in which they are not active, and it supports soft costs associated with the activities to explore new markets, like participating in a trade show, meeting with foreign clients, translating material on a website, and the sorts and the likes. Response has been, again, exceeding expectations. The program is currently oversubscribed. What's telling is that recipients are typically small firms. They're eager to explore new markets. In fact, 2/3 of them are exploring markets beyond the US, which is phenomenal in the case of Canada, because most MSMEs export to the US, and they tend to stay in that market, and they're timid to move beyond. And they're semi-young. The average age is between 10 and 15 years of age. The outcome has been good. In half the cases, it leads to the firm exporting to its target market. The third tool has been focused on gender issues. This is not new in Canada's trade approach, but it's a deliberate focus of our new trade agenda. Our research suggests that women-owned businesses continue to face discrimination in access to financing, venture capital, and opportunities in global trade. So addressing this is not only the right thing to do, but it also makes a lot of economic sense. We have financial projections that shows that achieving gender equality would add about $150 billion to the Canadian economy in the next 10 years. So here our approach has been two-pronged. Leveraging our FTA partnerships to focus on many cooperation activities. For example, in our modernized FTA agreement with Chile, we have a new gender chapter focused exclusively on gender issues that establishes a framework to track gender issues, cooperation activities around data, but also trade-focused, gender-focused events and women-focused trade missions to that market, but also leveraging a number of partnerships with international partners, initiatives by the private sector, such as the $1 billion roundtable in the US, and partnerships with a number of private organizations. We have a program that is dedicated to women-owned businesses in trade that delivers 4 key things. Women-focused trade missions, linking up women businesses with supplier diversity initiatives sponsored by major international corporations, fostering a number of ministerial roundtables, so conversations with women entrepreneurs. And I would say a sometimes overlooked tool is just linking up the community of women-owned businesses through a variety of platforms, but one key one has been the development of an online searchable inventory of women-owned businesses. We currently have over 50,000 women-owned businesses that are registered in this platform, and it's being accessed over 5 million times every year by procurement professionals from around the world. The last tool, and I promise to be very brief, is the Canada Technology Accelerator initiative. This has been launched 4 years ago, and it's meant to bridge companies that graduate from domestic incubators and accelerators with the international market. So we've assisted up to now over 500 companies. They tend to be young, but not so young, about 5 years of age, but are still considered early stage company in search of international partnerships, in search of investors and potential buyers. And so it's been very successful in offering companies 3 or 8 months internship programs in a number of competitive hub cities, mostly in the US, but we have one in Paris and London and one in New Delhi. So it's full immersion. We offer them a workspace. We offer them mentorships by industry experts, and our trade professional on the ground introduce them to potential investors and partners. Most of them are reporting growth at the end of the incubation period, growth in revenue, sales, and partnerships. All finished there, but these are really a snapshot of very practical tools to help overcome some of our key challenges faced by our MSMEs. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Mr. Lambert. And I would like to give the floor to Mr. Silini, who will present Switzerland's experience with MSMEs. It's 10 to 4. Okay, I don't want to put you under pressure, Mr. Silini. You will make the presentation you have prepared. But I think since we started at 10 past 4, I mean, perhaps we can afford to go beyond 4 o'clock to have a discussion here. I know that the organizers will not like this, but probably, I mean, presentations were quite interested, and I think there should be some possibilities to have a kind of debate between the audience and the panel. Mr. Silini, you have the floor.
Thank you very much. Good afternoon, ladies and gentlemen. I'm from the organization Switzerland Global Enterprise, who is the export promotion agency, as Mr. Ambassador said, of Switzerland and Fürstentum Liechtenstein. So we are talking about 2 micro markets population-wise. We are mandated by the government, but we are semi-private, so that means that we generate our revenues, first of all, by the government, as I said, and more or less 1/3 by consulting revenues and other revenues like strategic partnerships or sponsorship from private companies in Switzerland. We offer a waste network worldwide. We have 22 own offices, or in 22 countries we have own offices, which are placed normally under the umbrella of the Swiss embassies abroad, but we cover worldwide with other cooperation partners more or less 70 countries. And maybe to come back, because you can imagine that Switzerland, with a very small population, the companies are forced in a very early stage to internationalize. And we are talking about, here in Switzerland, there are 40,000 exporters, so companies who are going and approaching the export markets. Of course, Swiss companies, traditionally they start with the neighbor countries, so Germany, France, Italy mostly, and then they go a little bit they change maybe the continent and go over the ocean or eastwise to Asia. Our services, we offer a vast range of services, classical, I say more or less classical export promotion services, which is market intelligence, matchmaking, so partner search, buyer missions, fact-finding missions, trade fairs, and so on. But we started a little bit more to focus 2 years ago, especially on the micro companies, and as you said a little bit, we call them local roots, so companies which are at the fence or behind the fence, and looking how we can improve or maybe encourage them to internationalize. And 2 years ago, we conducted a nationwide survey asking our clients and non-clients of this segment what would be their preferred services. Yes, they need additionally to this what we already offer, and we thought that it was maybe already enough. And it was quite interesting because a few things in your countries you already implemented is one of the most mentioned requested service was the online access. They would like to have more online access to know-how and to data, and more a little bit the self-service approach, so that they can choose what they want by themselves, and if possible online. Then what is also a big need of startups especially is are improving the online tools. We have seen here a few. We also implemented a few. I will show you 1 or 2 more online tools. And especially what was requested is matchmaking tools online, as you mentioned, for example, of Connect America. And we started with a matchmaking, because matchmaking for us is not only matchmaking to potential buyers, but also to international experts, maybe in different countries. And so we started a matchmaking platform for experts, and there we also implemented a certification process, so that the people the experts which we place on this platform are tested and certified through our bodies to make sure that we guarantee a good quality. So I said online tools was mentioned. Then was also a high request is for consulting services around the digitalization, and especially here to the e-commerce as a channel, how to tackle new markets. I will show you after then what we do. And then as a fourth most mentioned need from the micro companies here in Switzerland was the community building, so that we should create or improve communities or community building, and especially what you mentioned, for example, in Philips, starting a mentoring program, because we also have a few bigger successful companies in export, so that the small companies, starters, could more learn from bigger companies. So, and these are a little bit, these were these four most requested fields. We started, as you see here, an example, a print screen of a so-called e-learning center, where we started to place a few knowledge. Maybe if you look inside, that's basic knowledge, but we are talking here about micro companies, maybe in the very, very first step. So learning centers where we have to talk, to explain them, what does it mean to export, what is a tariff number, how does the VAT work, and so on. So very basic, and started then to improve more and more with some topics about this. This is the expert directory, I said, this matchmaking tool in a first step only to certified experts. In a second step, we are now testing a few matchmaking also to potential clients or importers in different countries for specific sectors. Then what I didn't mention is that it was also more requests that I said the self-service, but also more and more personalized information. So, for example, in the past we had a newsletter. We have 10,000 companies who have subscribed the newsletter, and they don't want to receive one newsletter with maybe information which they don't need. So also we go more on the personalized need and personal interest, or what it could be of interest for them. So we work also with the datas, because you can imagine that each request or download the client does, an exporter does, we learn also more about their interests. It's a little bit like we try to a little bit the Amazon philosophy, to get more information about the client so that we better know what he could be interested for in the future, and which offer from our side could be of their interest. It's interesting because this table I heard 2 times the customs tariff databases, yes, from the European Union and also in Canada. And we also offer such a service. We offer it, but for more than 150 countries. We offer this service free of charge for Swiss companies. The functions are more or less the same, but really we try to cover the whole the whole world, or I say the most important countries. You see what can be downloaded or researched on this database. And it's very interesting because this until 2 years ago we didn't have such a database, and these requests about what is the customs in country XY, we had phone or email requests. And in the meantime, we have until yesterday more than 90,000 requests on this online database only here in Switzerland. So we see also this self-service approach and this online approach seems to be the right direction what companies generally want. Then we also started cooperations here with bigger players. I've heard this morning also that other organizations started cooperations with Google, for example. Why Google? Google started an initiative together with us last year, the so-called exportdigital.ch. This provides information about markets information from Google. Now, you know, and this is not a secret, each time when you Google something, I'm talking about the Google countries. If you Google something, Google knows exactly from where are you doing the research, what are you looking for, and how long do you stay on the page, and so on. And all these data are now available, or a lot of this information about the consumer behavior, the several markets, the patterns in searching products, services are available for Swiss companies. I don't know if from foreign you can access on this web page, I'm not sure, but it's interesting to know what are the kind of requests, and these information can be used then for marketing reasons for exporters if they would like to build up e-commerce shops, so they know when, where is requested something, what kind of marketing activities, are there seasonalities, and so on. And there is a whole package of services what can be combined. And obviously, as I said, also on this platform, these video tutorials about export basics or online marketing basics, so that the clients or companies or exporters from Switzerland can in easy self-study, learning a little bit what does it mean, what is to be considered if building up an e-commerce shop and going online. This is really in a fast track what we are working on, or we worked. And yes, I thank you very much for your attention and open for questions.
Thank you very much, Mr. Silini. And I've been a very bad moderator at managing time, at least. I mean, that I have to admit. But I mean, those presentations were very interesting. And I would like perhaps to invite comments from the floor or questions from the floor, if you have any. Let's say that we take 3 questions, and then we give the opportunity to the panelists to answer those questions. Are there any questions? Just raise your hand. Don't be so shy. Even if we are beyond schedule, I say we're going until 10 past. No. I mean, I have a question. And in particular, I would like to follow up on what you've said, Mr. Silini, at the end of your presentation, that there is a significant amount of overlap in those platforms. We've seen the EU platform, the Swiss as well as the Canadian platform. So it means that the governments are undertaking a big effort to put together information, to make those information available online, and you're not even sure whether this is acceptable from abroad. And this is a question: have those information the character of a public good? In other terms, I understand that in the case of the EU, this is accessible from everyone in the world. That's clear. I don't know about Switzerland and Canada, but if this is so, I mean, there are efforts which are made individually, separately, and I'm just wondering whether at some stage those efforts can be pooled, because updating information about customs duties, rules of origin, technical requirements is a nightmare if you want to keep the database up to date. And we will learn much more about this at the next session, because this will be the main issue, and I think it's a good introduction into the next session. So I would like to have your views about these very aspects of the problem. Being understood that we have here rich countries on the panel. I mean, countries which, of course, have the resources to fund this effort. And it's clear that not all the countries can do the same. And if this information, which is useful for any MSMEs on the world, can be made available or will have a public good character, this could perhaps allow us to achieve something much wider and to realize and to achieve significant economies of scale. Like to
Maybe I can say a little bit from our point of view. The experience we made just recently, for example, there is information or data which, from our point of view, should be accessible to a broader target group, and especially that could be put together a few some synergies. We started, for example, as I said, we cover 70 countries, for example, with information, and we have to provide information, news, and so on. And we know that, for example, other trade promotion organizations in this thing are also doing the same. They are also scouting in Brazil what is going on there, in Canada, in USA. And we started now discussions with other trade promotion organizations. How can we put together our synergies? To be frankly, until now, the result is not so positive. And we started to be bigger, also be bigger country, rich countries, and there, from the theory, everybody agrees. But you know, being public bodies, sometimes they are a little bit restricted to grant, for example, access to another country. I don't say that there is protectionism, but I say we just started this discussion, and now also our counterparts in other countries started in their different ministries. We hope that we will get in one or the other point common sense, because we would also then it's a give and take deal, yes. But until now, not yet successful from our point of view.
There is perhaps some scope for intergovernmental cooperation here, just to help the specialized agencies. I mean, Mr. Lambert, you've been also very much involved in this business, huh?
Yes, maybe a brief comment. First of all, I would say this is really a key area, I think, if we want to help our MSMEs integrate into global commerce. Access to information is certainly one of the key areas. This is one we've been working on. Our research indicates that, yes, we've spent countless years negotiating free trade agreements, but the truth is, especially for MSMEs, they are underutilized because of maybe lack of awareness of the opportunities, lack of information about them. So it is very much one area that we are trying to focus our efforts and resources in. In my new position at the Canada to the EU, I have to explain to my businesses what is in the 2,000-page freshly negotiated Canada-EU trade agreements, what's in there for them. Two MSMEs that are quite small, that do not have a lot of time, that often lack an export development professional on the board, and so the research is done by the CEO himself, and so the challenge is to provide this information in a digestible format, in a readily accessible format. So the Tariff Finder is that we came up with is, part of a genuine basic effort. I think we have to go a step further and try to integrate maybe information on rules of origins and customs information, customs compliance. I would say, and I would agree, that there is scope for intergovernmental cooperation. And the Open Data Initiative that the Director General Alberto was mentioning this morning between the WTO, ITC, and UNCTAD is something that I would very much support.
Yeah. No, thank you very much. Perhaps, I mean, I don't want to be killed by the organizers, so I think we have to wrap up. But I would like to just underline something that you mentioned, Mrs. Mogilnaya, is that we need to have a holistic approach. I mean, it does not suffice to make finance available, but I mean, the regulatory framework has to be... Yes, exactly. Has to be, I mean, yes, not only up to date, but I mean also has to be supportive of the activities of MSMEs. And this is certainly a very important lesson to draw here. I mean, that making available assistance is one thing, making available finance is something, but the regulatory environment counts a lot as well.
If I may add also, to the point that was just mentioned, in the work of the European Bank for Reconstruction and Development, we are often asked by SMEs to provide trainings on exports. And companies may not know anything about how to export, and we can provide a very basic level as to what do you do? So how do you start, and how do you search for a market? And of course, we are always faced with this situation that which countries do we present? We present those countries which have available information in different languages, and if there is information, let's say, in Canada about different tariffs, so if it's easily available, we can present it, because we need to show them different tools how to search for information. So if there would be a global platform where any company from anywhere in the world could go and search for tariffs, for different requirements, this would make our life also easier, because then we will not be having any different treatment for different countries. We could say, look, we show you the tool, you decide where you want to export.
So we have to implement a kind of MFN rules for access to all these kind of instruments that have been set up by different members. I don't know whether, Paolo, you would like to say a final word. You have 30 seconds.
Even less, I agree with everything you said, and we are actually proposing the EU to have a better regulatory environment for SMEs, notably to allow them to participate in the elaboration of rules, and as well our system is accessible to everyone. The fact that we give access to this information, in our view, is fundamentally helpful for our companies, even if they export for, because it's a transparent environment where our companies operate, and this is the only way we can allow them, help them to then be better job and growth creators.
Okay, thank you very much. Thank you for your attention. I would like to thank the panelists for their contributions, and I think that we can move now to the next session. And I'm calling upon my dear colleague Marcelo Sima, who is going to moderate the next session. Marcelo.